Welcome to the Excel Pod. Welcome to the Untied Podcast, where we unravel the knots of life with faith, wisdom, and encouragement, because together we're here to untie from tradition and embrace truth through powerful Bible teaching. My name is Garrett Bernithi. I'm one of the hosts of the show, along with my very good friend Corey Sawyers, and today we're bringing you another episode of the Untied Podcast, as this is Season 4, Episode 14. We've been going through the Sermon on the Mount this season. It has been an excellent study for us. We hope that it has been for you. And we're going to continue on with our study in Chapter 7 today as we look at the topic of judging, which Jesus moves into within his discussion. Last episode, which was actually a couple of weeks ago. We'll get into all that. But we talked about worry and finished out chapter 6. We looked at a lot of different things. We'll do a little bit of a breakdown to get everybody caught back up to where we are, and then get into our study of chapter 7 of the Gospel of Matthew. So, as we always do, it's great to join you today. We're thankful for your tuning in. We hope that you'll like, share, follow, and subscribe to this podcast, along with all other podcasts on the Excel Pod Network. We have a great group of podcasts, a growing group of podcasts, and we've got some exciting news that'll be coming up, coming your way very soon for some additions and some things coming back. So that'll be great, and I know that you'll appreciate that very much. So as we always do, let's go ahead and get this thing rolling, Corey. Man, what's been cooking?
Well, not a whole lot. I just sent you a picture. I don't know if you can get it pulled up. If you can't,
Yep.
That's fine. But I just sent you a picture of a breakfast sandwich that I made of some fresh country sausage and prosciutto, which, for those that do not know, prosciutto is basically Italian country ham that's just thinly sliced. But that has a fresh country sausage, it has a fresh country egg, it has garden tomato, pepper, cheese, prosciutto on a brioche bun. I love breakfast foods, period. I could eat breakfast foods morning, noon, and night. But I love experimenting with different combinations for breakfast sandwiches. And so anyway, that's about the only thing I've cooked here lately. I'm not saying it's good for you, but it was larping. A little mustard on it. I like a little mustard on my sausage. So anyway, I'm working today on cutting meat. Our congregation's actually feeding the UTM football team this Saturday, and so we've got pork loin and chicken thighs and smoked sausage that we're getting cut up and put in marinades, and then we'll be smoking all that this weekend and feeding them Saturday night. And so about 150 coaches, players, staff, and the whole 9 yards. And so anyway, that's one of our bigger cooking events of the year, and it's a good time of fellowship and, getting to meet the young men and hopefully making an impression on them. But I enjoy it just because of the cooking, if nothing else. So,
yeah. Well, that sandwich looks pretty good. Pretty good. I'll have to
yeah, I
try
could
to
eat one of them right now.
create that situation. But yesterday we had all of the teachers. School starts here tomorrow, and
Okay.
so
Monday here.
Oh, really? Yeah, all the kids are super excited. And so we've had the teachers here yesterday here at the building, and we had one of our members. He He did some pulled pork. He made that. We had some turkey and some sausage and beans and all the whole fixing, and really good. So everybody ate very well yesterday, including all those who helped us work. So that was a good deal. We had all the teachers, staff, administration was here, so that was great. We could support them in their efforts. But here, I haven't cooked anything really in a little bit. But last week, of course, we did not record last week. That is my fault because we were out, and I was hoping to be able to record, but had some change in plans. I wasn't able to. But we were in South Carolina, and I got a taste. I guess it really is my first taste of South Carolina barbecue.
I'm sorry.
And I don't know that I could say that this is everywhere. Maybe it was just this restaurant that we were at. We went there because they had some different seafood that my daughter-in-law was wanting to have, and but I got ribs, and my oldest son, he got a 3-meat, which was ribs and smoked turkey and brisket. And he said the turkey was really good. And when I didn't try it, but I looked at it, and it was, you could tell, nice and moist, good color, looked really good. He didn't mind the brisket, but the ribs, I judge a barbecue joint by the ribs. We're talking about judging today. This is righteous judgment. If the ribs aren't good, man, it's hard for me to give a 5-star review. So these were not the worst I've ever had, and maybe it's just a different style.
What a way to start a review with. It wasn't the worst I've ever had.
I'm not going to say the name. So, if you're in that area, I'm not going to detour you away or anything like that. Not that my voice really has any power, but there was so much pepper. The rib was, covered in pepper. Now, I like pepper, but I'm not like a big peppercorn, chicken. I've just never cared for all that. But I like pepper. But it was so covered in pepper. It was so overwhelming. The waitress came over and she's like, "How's everything?" And as I said, "Oh, it's okay." And as she's talking, I'm scraping the pepper off of the ribs. Okay, I like ribs. If there's a favorite food of my life, ribs, chicken fried steak, things like that are on that menu. But this was just, they were not kosher. They were not, I couldn't even eat all of it, Corey. And I had 2.5 ribs, and I couldn't do any more because there was so much pepper, and it just ruined the whole rib. And anyway,
did they have the mustard sauce on it?
They didn't, but they did have it available. And I have to say, I tried it. It's almost like a vinegary honey mustard kind of. I mean, that's kind of what it tasted like to me. And I actually dipped my fries in it, and it wasn't terrible, but I don't know that I would have put it on my barbecue. But they had that, and they had another one. I can't remember. You like hot stuff, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they actually had it was a dipping sauce. It was very watery, but it was, it had cayenne pepper in it, and there was some vinegar you could taste, and there was something else, but you would have probably liked that. But their barbecue sauce wasn't a big fan of that either. So, I don't have very many barbecue experiences where I walk out and I'm like, I don't know about that. But this was definitely one of those. So, I'm not, the Carolina barbecue, I'm just not sold on. Again, it could have just been that place. But anyway, I'm going to have to make some ribs soon so that I can get my fill.
Get that bad memory out.
Oh, man. So, yeah. And maybe, I don't know, maybe some of our listeners like a lot of pepper on their ribs or their barbecue. And that's great. That's fine. I'm not just not my thing.
I put a lot of black pepper on mine, but not enough that you can scrape it off.
Oh, my goodness, dude. There was so much of it. I mean, I had a pile on my plate. So, and I tell you what, they had it figured out how to get your seasoning to stay on that piece of meat. I'll give them that, because it was hard to get off. But anyway, but the turkey apparently was good. The brisket was good, but even Parker, he was like, I had to get rid of all the pepper. They put it on everything.
I like to watch shows and not that teach the history of barbecue in different regions, whatnot. And Carolinas was, I think, more heavily influenced by Caribbean flavors, and that's where some of that spiciness comes in and whatnot. The mustard sauce, I just do not understand at all. Like, to me, it would taste good on a sausage and biscuit, but not barbecue, which I'm not a huge sauce on my barbecue guy anyway, which is probably directly related to being influenced in West Tennessee by Memphis-style barbecue, which you put dry rub on stuff, not so much sauce. But, I've always thought, like, sauce should be an option. It shouldn't be something you have to cover your poor cooking skills. And that's what it seems like it is in some places.
I was raised kind of like you. So Papa and my Uncle Greg and me, of course, we're all pretty close, but we grew up hearing Papa say, if you got to put something on it, it ain't good.
Yeah. And that's steak or whatever.
Yeah. And now I will say this, that when I cook ribs, I go through spurts where sometimes at the end I'll put some sauce on there, but I'll leave it on there to caramelize it. And it's just to add to the flavor. I like doing that some. Barbecue chicken, I'll do that some. But to be honest, I have found that just put the seasoning on there, let it finish out. It's hard to beat that. I mean, especially with a steak. I don't put anything on a steak unless it is ruined and burnt, which well done is burnt. Well is burnt. Medium and below, that's where it's got to be. So, if it's super dry, I've got to put something on it. But anyway, so that's just kind of where I'm at. But to be honest, if they would have had the mustard sauce on it, probably would have been an improvement.
So that's my point. Know. If you're saying that's an improvement, then you're a sauce company, not a barbecue company.
Yeah. So I don't know. We probably, if you're a Carolina barbecue fan, that, hey, that's great.
Bless your hearts.
Bless your heart. But I texted a friend the other day and I told him about it, and I said, I'm not really sure about this. He goes, they don't know how to do barbecue. So I don't know. I'm probably just offended whoever lives over there, but not my style. Because every section of the country has their own style, and they like their style, and I got to appreciate that. But it's just not my favorite. And to be honest, I've had Caribbean style, which is lots of spices. I think if I remember right, it's lots of spices, and it is hot. This just straight up pepper, man. I think the Caribbeans would have been like, "What are you doing?" So I don't know. There's my judging.
If you're going to go to Carolina, just go get you some seafood. You're close enough to the ocean. Get you some seafood.
They can do that, man.
They can do that, and I think Krispy Kreme Donuts is based out of.
Hey, their fried chicken over there. They've got a couple of franchises over there that I've never heard of, and their chicken's pretty good.
Yeah, South Carolina peaches are really good. I've got some close acquaintances in Georgia that when I on the Monument Company, they Elberton, Georgia is where we get a lot of our granite from, which is over closer to the South Carolina line. And they send us peaches, a case of peaches every year. And one year I called him after the truck had brought a shipment, and I telling him, you know, some things that were askew or whatever on the order. And he said, "Would you get them peaches I sent you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've already eaten 2 of them." I said, "Ain't nothing like Georgia peaches." And he started laughing. He said, "Them came out of South Carolina." And I said, "South Carolina?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "That's where all people in Georgia go to get their peaches, is South Carolina." And I said, "Y'all are in the peach state?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "We just got better marketing than they do in South Carolina, but they got better peaches over there." So
yeah, they made the claim Georgia peach. It wasn't South Carolina peach.
Yeah. So just get you some shrimp and grits and some peach cobbler and a Krispy Kreme donut.
I did get some collard greens there. They were good.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah, some Southern cooking. Fried chicken and collard greens, that'd be good.
Yep.
In fact, that honey mustard sauce they make might be good for dipping fried chicken in.
You know what? I think you're right. I didn't even think about that.
But not barbecue.
You got to, I mean, not everybody likes honey mustard. That's just kind of what it really tasted like a honey mustard, vinegar, a little bit of spice, kind of a mix. Of course, there was pepper in there. But
just
pretty
in case
good.
you didn't get enough.
In case you didn't get enough. They want to make sure that you get your fill of that. So their bill for purchasing pepper has got to be up there. The only thing I didn't have pepper-wise at the meal was a Dr. Pepper. So, yeah. Speaking of good peaches, Porter, Oklahoma, that's up kind of around Tulsa, they have really good peaches.
Really?
Very good, yeah. You know Steve Schinnerer. That's where him and his family, they were there. I want to say that was his first work out of school. That might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's right. And so that's the only reason I know about him, because when they came down to Cherokee Hills where we were, they would go up there and they have a big peach festival. Man, they're good. They're really good. Mm. It's hard to beat a good peach, man.
Yeah, you got that right. Mm. I can feel the fuzz now.
Oh, man. Well, so, there's my food critique.
The juice dripping off my beard like the oil off Aaron's beard.
Oh, what was that saying? What was that burger place? If it doesn't get all over the place, it doesn't belong in your face. I think that's, I don't remember.
I hadn't heard that, but that's right.
I think it was like, who was that? Like Carl's Jr. or something back in the day.
That's how you know it's a good burger. If it's not making a mess, it's not a good burger.
It ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. Very true. Very true. Well, we've got a good study to get into.
All right.
We're in Matthew chapter 7.
Uh-huh.
And we've only got this episode and one more, Corey, this season, even though we've had a couple of breaks here due to some things going on. Of course, we've never gone through the summer before. Normally take the summer off. So, that is what it is. But we've just got this episode and one more that will finish out the Sermon on the Mount. So once we're done with that, we will be working on season 5, which is, man, it's crazy that we're approaching season 5 at some point. So anyway, we have been in Matthew chapter 6 and breaking all of this down. And just as a reminder, I want to just continue to take us back to the thesis of the entirety of this sermon, which is all the way back up in chapter 5 and verse 20, which says, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." And I'll say this, that while that might be a thesis statement of this particular sermon, to which we stated that Jesus probably spoke in a number of places, not just once. This is something for us to really consider in our own life and our own faith, because we certainly do not need to take on this mindset either that the scribes and the Pharisees had, to be watchdogs, to be self-righteous, to be the point of the show, if you will, all that kind of stuff. We really need to be careful about all of that. And so that's one thing that this is pointing out over and over again. Then as we've gone through here, we've been talking about the areas of righteousness. We've talked about the giving of alms, prayer, fasting, and money. And we've broken down the prayer in chapter 6, 9 through 10, verse 11, verse 12, and 13 that have all these different contrasts in them, or sections in them. And then we got to the contrast of chapter 6, verse 19 and 20, which was heaven and earth, 22 and 23, which was light and dark. Verse 24 was God and wealth. And then verse 25 through 34, which is what we talked about in our last episode, was faith and work. And so do what? Worry. Yeah, worry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, worry. I have typed work.
I'm not trying to
or
judge
it is
you.
Corrected to work. So that's what we have discussed, and there are several illustrations that were used in this section here. You had birds, you have the time of life, or as the American Standard Version has the maybe the ESV too, measure of life. You had the lilies of the field, and then the Gentiles. So those were the illustrations that Jesus was using, and of course we have all of these do nots in here, which Corey, we're not done with. We actually get into chapter 7, verse 1 through 6 here, and there we go. You can see if you're watching this that we have two uses of it, unless I've missed one, of the do nots as we get into chapter 7. So that's just kind of a rough breakdown or a recoup of what we have looked at, and today we're looking at the topic of judging that Jesus begins to discuss. So, Corey, that's getting us up to speed, hopefully. So here we are in chapter 7.
Yeah, after that thesis in chapter 5, we talked about 6 different comparisons about righteousness. You've heard it said, but I said it to you. And then now you have 6 areas of righteousness, and we've looked at 5 of them in chapter 6. And if we're not careful, we see that big chapter 7 in our Bible that's there at the top of the screen there, big giant chapter 7, and suddenly we say, we're changing our flow of thought here because the chapter has changed. But I always try to point out to people, we made it about 1,200 years without chapter breaks until finally it was divided. And while that maybe is helpful for us in getting on the same page, it may have done as much bad as it did good, because we sometimes think that the flow of thought has stopped. But remember, chapter breaks are not inspired. And here's one that I think is a horrible chapter break, because as you point out, verse 1, he has our do not again. So another area of righteousness that he's going to talk about. And again, you go back to the beginning of chapter 6 and verse 1, and he's talking about beware practicing your righteousness before men, so that you'll be seen of men. And that's the idea. This is we said last week it was the world's favorite verse. Do not judge, so that you can't judge me. The lifestyle you're living is wrong. Do not judge me. That particular thing you're doing is a sin. You can't judge me. Well, that's not what he's talking about. But what he is talking about is judging people in such a way that you're trying to make yourself look good by making them look bad. And maybe that's the one kind of different part about this than all these other things he's talked about are things they were doing to make themselves look better than others. This one is maybe the easiest way to make yourself look better in the eyes of men, is by making other people look bad. It doesn't require any effort on your part. You don't have to do anything or change anything. Just make them look bad, and as they're brought down, you stand out, and so that's the idea that we're talking about here. The word here for judge in the original language means to condemn or to pronounce a sentence of guilt or something of that nature. And that's the problem, is that when we are the one that pronouncing that, there's only one judge. James 4 says there's only one lawgiver and judge, and that's the Lord. But this is a really misunderstood text, because if I tell you that, your lifestyle that you're living is a sin because the Bible tells me so, that's not me judging, that's the Bible judging. I'm just telling you what the Bible said, any more than if you rob a convenience store and you go to court and the jury and judge pronounces you guilty, and I'm the bailiff, and I come over to your table and I put you in handcuffs and say you have to come with me because you're guilty of this crime. Did I judge you? Well, of course not. I'm just telling you what the judge said about it, and same thing with this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I want to butcher this quote. It's I'm going to change it a little bit due to the context of what we're talking about, but I think it's fair to say that we live in a world, and they lived in a world back then that is very similar in the context of what Jesus is talking about here, that we as people, in some way, if we're not careful, can, like you said, we can feel a sense of importance, or we can, I don't know what the right way to say this is, we can make ourselves feel better about ourselves by the fall of others. And we almost rejoice in the fact that somebody else messed up. Mm-hmm. And that's, kind of where we're getting at here, is that the more that somebody else falls, the more we rise in our own minds, we rise to the top and we feel better about ourselves. So I'm rejoicing in their fall. And that is a terrible way to live. That's a terrible mindset to have. But this is kind of typical for the Pharisees and the scribes, and in some cases, it's typical for us today. And so the reality is that when somebody sins, judgment is of course there. And like you said, we're not responsible for judging them as far as their eternal consequence. And to be honest, I'm thankful for that. I don't want that job. But for some reason, we can sometimes as people feel like it is our responsibility. And it is certainly not our responsibility. Even in man's sinful state, God has done everything to try and bring you out of that sinful state. And for us as individuals who are trying to be disciples of Jesus, we are to take on that same mindset, that when somebody falls in sin, that we're not standing over them saying, what is it, Psalm 38, where David's enemies are going, aha, I've got you. That we're not the people doing that. We're not there to stand over and say, I told you so, and then beat them in the ground like apparently the Corinthian brethren were doing in 2 Corinthians chapter 2. But rather Paul says, we all know what he did. Of course, the man of 1 Corinthians 5, we all know what he did. But instead of doing that, why don't we love him and forgive him and bring him along so that he doesn't bow out due to the fact that he is, I forget the wording of it, but, with excessive sorrow, he's just like, there's no point, and he gives up. So, there's a lot of things to think about with that. But like you said, this judgment of somebody else's sin is, from an eternal consequence is not ours to give.
Yeah, that and we'll talk about this when we get in the next verse. It's the standard. Sometimes it's not, we're wanting them to meet our standard or our opinion. And if they don't, we're saying that's a sin. But, just to the point, are we never to judge? Well, there's lots of places we could go, and you can probably think of a ton of passages that would tell us. One of my favorites is John 7:24. You have all these opinions about Jesus being thrown out when he's there in Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths or whatever. And Jesus in John 7:24 says, judge with righteous judgment. He's telling them, you judge me, but you judge me with righteous judgment. Don't judge according to appearance, what you think, the way it looks. So if he's saying you must judge, in fact, if you'll right-click that second judge there, I think that may be even an imperative. Is that an imperative? It's too small for me to read.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, verb, active, right up 2 lines above that.
Yeah.
Verb, present, active, imperative.
Yeah.
See, he's commanding them to judge. So how in John 7 is he commanding you to judge? In John chapter 7, he's commanding you not to judge. Well, obviously, it's the way that we're judging, and the standard we're judging is the problem. But my favorite way to prove that judging, he's not eliminating judging, is because if you stay right in the text of Matthew 7 and you drop down to verse 6, which is going to kick off the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, but he talks about not giving what's holy to dogs, don't throw your pearls before swine. Well, how do you know that if people are pearl? He's not talking about rover and pigs. He's talking about people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you determine who's a dog and who's a swine without making a judgment? See? So he's not eliminating judging. He's eliminating judging in a certain way, the way that the scribes and Pharisees had been doing so. Like you think about all the examples of how the scribes and Pharisees, why is your master eating with publicans and sinners?
Mm-hmm.
That's wrong. Why don't your disciples wash their hands before you eat? The Pharisees fast all the time. How come we don't fast? There's all these different ways that they're trying to apply their standard, and saying you got to live up to our expectations or you're wrong. And that's the kind of judgment that he's saying not to do here in verse 1. It's not that you don't judge at all, but it's how you judge. So verse 2, in the way you judge, you're going to be judged, and by the standard you judge, it's going to be measured to you. So those are the 2 areas in which we're not to judge. The way that you judge, as you talked about a while ago, harshly, without mercy, without love. If you're judging in that way, even if you're telling what the Bible says, you're not doing them any good. But then also the standard you're judging by. Is it my opinion, or my preacher Garrett Bernithi said, well, those standards aren't what matters. If the standard's the Word of God, then there's nothing wrong with that, because that applies to me and you and everybody else.
Right.
But if I'm making up my own standard, then when that's doubled back and applied to me, I'm not going to like it too much.
Yeah, and that is the entirety of the premise of Romans chapters 1 and 2. Is that the Jews were judging the Gentiles for all the things that they were doing. Now, were the Gentiles doing things wrong? Absolutely. And Paul lists it out. I mean, they're engaged in homosexuality. They're engaged in idolatry. They're engaged in a lot of different things. They're not innocent of their sin. They have certainly lived in their sin. And Paul points that out. But then in Romans chapter 2, starting in verse 1, he turns it right around. He said, I think we've talked about this before, but I just picture Paul looking at them and just kind of smirking and saying, what are you laughing at? You're doing the same thing, but you're judging them for what they're doing. And so you know, that is the type of mentality that, you know, we are to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. And that's the very thing that the scribes and the Pharisees were doing. They were living in their own sin, doing their own thing, but yet judging other people for the very things that they were doing.
And Romans 14 is another good example of this too, because, you know, because you're not, I'm keeping days, I'm saying that I'm better than you because you're not keeping the days. And you're turning around saying, because I'm not keeping the days, I'm better than you.
Yep.
And that standard that we've made up when the gospel's not about those things, you know, that's the problem that we get into. And we're not talking about, by the way, we're talking about untied from, you know, the tradition. We're not talking about just in the religious world or in the world. We're talking about in the church.
Yeah.
We can be guilty of this. And, you know, I find out that I hear that Garrett believes this or does this or thinks this or preach that or whatever. I don't go talk to Garrett. I just going to write him up on Facebook in front of the whole world to see, you know, or Garrett, I confirm it with Garrett. Garrett's got a matter of opinion and he's got his opinion and I've got mine. But of course, my opinion is way better than Garrett's. Why don't Garrett follow my opinion? So I got to write him up for that because he don't have the same opinion I do, you know. And, man, we just do more harm. And what he's saying is we're falling right in the category of the scribes and Pharisees when we do those things.
Yeah. And I think that adding in, you know, to add on top of Romans 14, I think we can throw in to add on to that same idea, 1 Corinthians 8 through 10, you know, that they've got the right to do something and all that, but that doesn't really make it right to do. But then, let me see, is it, I'm trying to think here. I'm going, drawing a blank. I don't know if it's 2 Corinthians, or if it's 1 Corinthians 14 or it's 1 Corinthians, where we're again talking about that same kind of thing. I'll have to come back to it. I'm drawing a blank, but anyway, but that idea is so, in your face that just because it, you know, like what Paul's discussing in each of those letters, you know, whether it has to do with the eating of meat, the recognition of certain days, or even the drinking of alcohol or whatever, the premise is there. Well, it's wrong for you. It's not wrong for me, but I'm going to hold it over you. It's showing multiple mindsets that are all wrong because we're not considering one another, because we're holding our own personal traditional values over what you believe or what you hold. And the reality is that as we come to what Jesus is doing, or the result, I guess, of what Jesus is doing, that really comes to realization in the book of Acts, is that we're seeing, you know, Ephesians chapter 1, 2, 3 really discusses this idea that there are many cultural and traditional backgrounds that are being brought together. It's actually chapter 2, from verse 11 down to verse 15, that we're really seeing that, because we're making the Jew and the Gentile one new man. So we have these backgrounds of different places, cultures, traditions that have all these different things that they've grown up with and known, and now we're bringing them into this new world, spiritually speaking, to where everybody's able to receive the spiritual blessings in the heavenly places. Ephesians 1 and verse 3. Paul says in Romans that, you know, the Jews that fallen away, well, they have the right to, they have the ability to be grafted back into the tree. The Gentiles have been grafted into that tree, and so they're both able to get to the tree because of each other. But they've got to realize that the standards and the cultures of the life that you have lived, or of the things that you have been brought up with, if they don't align with Jesus, they don't matter. And therefore, we don't have the right to hold those things over one another and judge them for the things that we may not necessarily agree with. And the problem is that whenever it comes to tradition, we, just like the scribes and Pharisees, if we're not careful, can begin to judge other people by the traditions that we have rather than by the laws of that God has given. And that is what causes a lot of division and dissension within the church and within families and other relationships, because you're not aligning with me. And so I always go back to Philippians chapter 2, where we learn that we're to have the mind of Christ. And I've said this probably on here, and I've said this a number of places because it's just so true. Because I've heard people say this, where we're all to be like-minded. Well, I agree that we're to be like-minded, but with who? Because if me and you are like-minded, but let's say, Corey, you're like-minded with me on whatever it is, and I'm wrong, then we're nothing more than like-mindedly wrong. So we're not to be like-minded with one another. We're to be like-minded with Jesus. And if you are, and I am like-minded with Jesus, well, it's only at that point that we can be like-minded in the sense of the text. Because every one of us as individuals has got to be aligned with the mind of Jesus. We're disciples of Jesus. Therefore, our walk and our lifestyle is like of Jesus. And it's only at that point that we can begin to truly understand there's a level of understanding that we're to have, and it has nothing to do with the traditions that we've built. It has everything to do with the Bible and what the Word of God has to say for our life. And that's something that the Jews, the scribes and the Pharisees in particular, what he's discussing there, that's what they've got away from. And they hold the Mishnah up higher than they do the biblical text. And that's a major problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so he explains the way it ought to be by giving us kind of a funny illustration here when he talks about this idea of looking at your brother and seeing this speck or splinter or whatever in his eye, and you don't notice the log that is in your eye. Or how can you say to your brother, let me get that splinter out of your eye when you got a lot? So you're laying in the optometrist's chair, and you've been using your chainsaw, and a little piece of sawdust flew up and got in your eye, and you weren't wearing eye protection like you should have been. So you get to the optometrist, and I walk in, and I've got a 15-foot 4x4 sticking out of the front of my head. That's the picture that he's painting here. So he says you need to worry about that log that's in your own eye, get it out, then you can see more clearly to take care of the speck or the splinter that's in your brother's eye. Again, it's not the problem that we're pointing out others' sin. It's not that you have to wait until you are perfect before you can preach or teach, or nobody's preaching and teaching. The problem is that you've let whatever it is that's in your eye grow to this point and you're not even trying to worry about that, and yet you're nitpicking every little thing with your brother. And, as the great philosopher Michael Jackson once said, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways, But we want to do like the police, and we want to say, every breath you take, I'll be watching you,
For those of you who did not catch that, there was two musical references there. I've never heard Michael Jackson called the great philosopher.
Well, in that particular song, at least, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. Oh, yeah.
At some point, I'm going to have to figure out how to be, every time you have a song reference, that I'm able to play it over. I'll have to figure that out. But I don't know. I don't know if I could build that big a library.
Hey, at the workshop, we could do a karaoke night, maybe. Anyway, that's a whole nother issue.
There we go.
But he's saying, don't be like the police. Don't be saying, every breath you take, I'll be watching you. Start with the man in the mirror.
That's right.
Then you can see more clearly how that you can help your brother get that sawdust out of his eyes.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, goes... Well, go ahead.
The ridiculousness of, as soon as I started explaining it with modern lumber terms, you started laughing. That it's such a ridiculous idea. Mm-hmm. Why would the guy with the speck in his eye even want you? You're the least qualified person. And that's usually the way it is, the person that is the most judgmental. Like I'll get you some more emails sent to you. I'm going to say something and make some people mad. But like the people that say, hey, y'all using New American Standard, the ESV, it cuts out verses. You need to use the King James Version is what Paul brought over on the Mayflower. And if it was good enough for them, it was good enough for, Well, usually the people that are that adamant about a particular translation know the least about the original languages. Mm-hmm. And know the least about the translation process of anybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's not some translations that are better than others, but I'm saying, I've got this big log in my eye that I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to be the one to point out others' flaws, see?
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, you're wrong, Garrett, because you're preaching and teaching with a New American Standard or an ESV. You ought to be using a King James, and then someone says, well, how often do you read your King James? Well, I don't, but, that's the proverbial log in the eye while you're trying to get the splinter out of somebody else's.
Yeah.
So, we don't need to make judgments outside of what God's Word has already said by our standards. And at the same time, we also need to check our own intentions, our own heart, when we're thinking about talking with someone about what it is that is going on. Here's another example that I've heard used several times in this one. Every congregation has that one guy or that one lady that is always coming forward at the invitation song. And, if we're not careful, in the back of our mind, we're thinking, oh, they're just trying to get everybody's attention, or, what. Well, how do you know that?
Yeah.
That's unrighteous judgment. So the way we judge and the measure we judge by is the problem here. But someone, I mess up and you say, hey, Corey, let's talk about this, and you're showing me mercy and grace and love, and here's what the Bible has to say about that. Well, then, when you are judged by God, guess what He's going to do for you? He's going to judge you with mercy and grace and love, and according to the standard that we have, and not some different standard. That's what we want, and that's what we ought to give to others.
Right. So this, again, we just keep tying this back to that thesis. The master teacher here is just continuing to drive this point home because, and like you said, who knows how people reacted to the things that he was saying, but, I probably would have laughed at this statement. And that was the point, that he wanted to use something that was so outlandish that people are like, well, of course. Like you just said, there's everybody agrees with this. This is absolutely ridiculous. But those who are truly righteous, and what I mean by truly righteous is that they are people who are doing as John said, they're walking in the light. They are striving to be the best, align themselves with the New Testament. They're aligning themselves with the principles of God. They're walking with Jesus throughout their life, and they recognize that they sin. They recognize the behaviors they had. They understand transformation needs to take place. They're constantly looking at themselves, and they're trying to be honest with themselves and change what needs to be changed and grow where they need to grow. They're constantly making mistakes, but they're always getting back up, and they're people who have a strong prayer life, and they understand they need the Lord in their life, and they need that help, and they need that's what righteousness is looking like. But unfortunately, we in the text here, and even in our day and age, righteousness has unfortunately become this type of term from a religious standpoint, that it's almost a level or an appointed place, like it's a position. But righteousness is not a position. It's never been a position. Righteousness is a term that the Lord is using here to define you and what you have become. Because outside of Christ, you're not righteous. But in Christ, you can be righteous, which means that you're abiding by the right things, the right standards, the right teachings of the Lord, and you're living by those. He's what makes you righteous. And so it is a walk, it's a lifestyle. So when we consider that, if you are truly righteous, which means that you're obedient in your faith to the Lord, His standard is the only standard of life. Colossians 3:15-17, Christ is sitting on the throne of your heart. You understand you don't have time to point your finger at anybody else and say, look at you. Because you're always, from the great philosopher Michael Jackson, you're always looking at the man in the mirror, and you're understanding, I have enough faults of my own. I have enough problems myself. I don't have time to look at anybody else and say and say what's wrong with you. If we begin doing that, it's just like we started this thing off by saying that you become the people who live in this world who take a certain pleasure, or they are uplifted in some way due to the fall of someone else, and that is the complete opposite emotion or feeling or mindset that any true Christian ought to have. We ought to sympathize with those who fall to sin and not judge them and say, well, they did it to themselves, and walk away. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a time where you've got to show tough love. You have to do that, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just judging everybody else according to this standard, acting like you're better than them because they have fallen.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And sometimes we're quick to make assumptions based on what we see, rather than, what get to know people and the real situations and what's going on, Again, going back to John 7:24, making righteous judgments, So that's the idea, is we're quick to look at others and try to maybe not even know the situation, what's going on, but that's the kind of unrighteous judgment that we need to, like I may look like a city slicker shining up through the shoes, but underneath I might be a cotton picker picking out a mess of blues. You just never
Ricky
know.
Skaggs?
That's Ricky Skaggs.
There you go.
Like I might look like a bank teller pushing facts in a file, but I'd rather be a hog collar chewing cud in the sty. Show me where I start. Find a horse and cart. I'm just a country boy at heart.
Oh, man. I don't know how we get through these things. Oh, anyway. Well, do not. That is the key of this. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces.
Yeah. And this is really, it's got the do not, but it's got a different kind of verb. So it's really kind of a second illustration on the judging, because you're not judging, you're telling them what the Word of God says. Mm-hmm. But I really think it's more of a transition into I think this is the way I view it, the more of the list of the twos that's going to be the conclusion of the sermon. We've had 6 contrasts in righteousness. We had 6 areas of righteousness, and starting here, we're going to have 6 groups of 2 that he's going to talk about, which helps us to understand that there's not a middle ground. He's closing out the sermon like we ought to close out a sermon, and let people know there's a choice to be made, and it's one way or the other, But it does serve as an illustration here of, how we are. There's going to be some people that are going to listen, some people that are not. So you need to really think about how you're going to. Are you not only how I judge, but how do you take what people say? And that's what, again, happens so many times. You're trying to explain to people, and they want to quote chapter 7 and verse 1, don't judge unless you're judged. So what are you going to do when they're actually teaching from God? Are you going to accept it as judgment, or accept it for what it is, that it comes from God?
Which that's what 1 Thessalonians 2:12 or 13, what was said about the Thessalonian brother. They accepted it for what it was, the Word of God, which I think is so powerful. And and certainly that's the mindset that we need to have. And I believe, I know that we give the Sanhedrin as a whole a pretty hard time. And rightfully so. I mean, Jesus calls them out. They are what they are. But they didn't start out like that. No. These things grew over time. And this doesn't mean that every single person, was a bad person or anything like that. But as a group, this is what they had grown into. So that's why we have to be very careful to understand our own walks as individuals. There's nothing about the church of the New Testament, that is based upon a group's standing. Everything is based individually. So your salvation is individual. Your faith is individual. The grace you're extended is individual. The mercy you're extended is individual. The way that your ability to be saved, that is on an individual basis. Your forgiveness, your repentance, it's all individual. You're never going to gain any of that by being a part of a group. Now, somebody could come back and say, yeah, but you are a part of the body. Well, that's true. You are a part of the body. But when we are, on that day of sentencing, I think that's probably more accurate. I don't know what you think about that, Corey, but judgment happens right when you die. Sentencing happens when the Lord comes back. So there's not going to be, and I know that Paul says that, we're going to be, Jesus is going to present his bride to the Lord, but it's going to be on an individual basis. So you're not going to be, you're a part of this group, you're good to go. It's going to be every single name, every person. I have no idea how that's going to happen, but it is based on your individual faith and righteousness and all of that. And so we really have to understand that. And Jesus is showing that here, that you need to check yourself and understand you and not worry about what everybody else is doing. Now, there's a lot of things, in life that we would help people and mentor people and all that kind of stuff. But within the context here, this is a teaching principle, if you will, for us to be the people that we need to be.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Corey, do you have anything?
I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
Man in the mirror. That's it. Got to check myself
Before you
I
wreck
wreck
yourself.
myself. Oh, here we go. Well, any closing thoughts, Corey, before we embarrass ourselves any further?
No. When you put it that way, no.
Oh man. Well, we really are grateful for our time together. Corey and I like to have fun and love to spend this time with you and work through this with you and laugh with you and all of you who are tuning into this. We're just grateful that you have taken the time to join in, whether you're listening or watching the podcast. Again, you can watch it on YouTube or on Excel TV. But we're grateful for your time that you put into this. We just hope that this is helpful for you, helping you grow and understand whatever it is that we might be studying in each given season. And we're just grateful for the time that we're able to spend together. As we said before, we've only got one more episode, and we're going to look at those 6 groups of 2 to finish out the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7. So if you're going to be tuning in, we want to encourage you to probably go ahead and read through that, and then we'll help you identify each of those different groups so that we can close this out and be able to close out the season. And then we'll get ready for season number 5 coming soon. So we're grateful for you joining with us, and we hope that the Lord will continue to bless you in your daily walk with Him. And keep studying, keep learning, keep growing. We highly encourage you to do that. Go back and check everything that we've talked about today. We certainly don't want you to just take our word for anything. We want you to study this on your own. Submit any questions that you have. We'd love to tackle those and try to answer them. I'd love to hear from you. So we're grateful for you. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, we hope that you will stay on time.